It's an older book. You might not be able to find it, but it's well worth it if you can find it, maybe a secondhand shop or something. It's a book about caterpillars. It's a children's book. It's a very fond memory, I think, but it's totally worth it. So check that out. Now I'm going for how you write a book. A lot of people can have this like great idea in their head, but they didn't end up, sitting down to write it out. That's kind of what it is. You got to sketch out your ideas, and you got to actually complete a book. It's kind of a miserable slog. Basically, okay, so I started my book. And so within a 2 year, actually almost a 3 year period, it took, so it was about 100 pages with references. And she took years because we were doing a lot of research to back the book at the same time. But those 3 years kind of break down to the first third, like a third and third. But the first third is trying to see what other people have done that allowed sort of your book to exist in the first place. Then the next phase is being able to find all the information that you want to fill your book with. And then finally, the third phase is just refining it and getting it to be the book that you want it to be, and to be able to tell the story that you want it to tell. So the first, I'm going to talk more about, I don't care about the subject material kind of stuff. I'm going to talk more about what are you going to put in that book. And how are you going to get your ideas just on paper? Because putting your ideas on paper is difficult. I'm not at text-to-speech recording yet. I kind of want to do that one in a little bit. The video is a good substitute for it, but video files can get large. A speech-to-text is what you really want. A speech-to-text program. That's what I was talking about. And that will really kind of make it sort of a joie de vivre, where it's no, it's actually enjoyable. You're dictating in it, and the computer records what you want to talk about. And that covers half of part of the difficult part of the journey, because you get a lot of your bulk ideas out of the way. So basically how that kind of goes is once you so you sit down with a piece of paper. It would help if you had a stack of scrap paper at home, or a cheap notebook that you can just put ideas in and stuff, of how you want, who's in your book. If you're doing a character driven novel, who's in your book, what are the players, what are their characters like. You're gonna have to keep and maintain that. That's your doctrine. You're gonna have to keep and maintain all your stuff together. Otherwise, halfway through the book, you can end up with a huge character shift that is not really what you wanted at the start. Advice there is to actually just stick to the script. What you started out with in the originally, if it's your first book, just write it out and just put it on a piece of paper. It's I want a book that does X. I want an instruction manual. I want a book that other people can enjoy. I want a book that I can enjoy. I want a book that tells me how to do something. Get that out on paper first, and then go through your notes, because you'll have a lot of notes, and you should have a lot of notes. even something as simple as a children's book where, Mary Had a Little Lamb. That nursery rhyme can be its own book, and you can make it a book. How you want to make it a book is a different question. Hardcover, illustrations, all the good stuff. I'm usually distracted trying to grasp the general case. But what we actually want to have there is something that can really allow you to have that success kind of thing. And part of that book journey for me, there's a lot of second guessing your audience, and I kind of want to address that because it's one of those like mental and psychological blocks. It's not a writer's block, but it's your own sort of like, how do I communicate this and then read it back to myself as your own audience member. And that's not writer's block. That's just like, how do you write? What voice is it? Does that voice come out the way you want it to sound? But really, it's like a shotgun. Your first sets of drafts are just get it out. That's why I would encourage you to use the speech to text programs, because what happens on those ones there, you might not have a lot of time or something like that, but you'll be able to get a bulk of that out. And then you can get a text file and go in and edit and just sort of cut the crap, which is good. There we go. So in the first third of the book writing, you get the main sort of, that's the meat on your plate. You should have a breakdown of sections, chapters, plot points. If you're going for a plot points, if you're going to do a novel, what are the big, remember in high school English, they had that like picture, like, climax, denouement, prologue, epilogue, that type of stuff. That's kind of where you're really fleshing it out. Like, the main character, Jill, does this, then she does that. That causes, Bill, something happens to that Bill guy over there, and then they'll live happily ever after, or whatever. That's the part that, when you're learning how to write a book, is extremely and excruciatingly frustrating. It doesn't really come naturally, because it's one of those things where you're learning how to second guess your audience. And what you're doing is you're trying to educate your audience into your fantasy world that you've sort of created and want to provide for them, because it's like, it's not just your book, it's their book when they read it. And that's the showmanship, and that's the business part that really only comes with experience and age, because it's like, it really does have to kind of be an open and shut case like that, because why? Because you're learning how to cater to that new audience. It could be your parents, it could be your mom and dad, it could be your sister, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncles, family, total stranger on the other side of the world kind of thing. So that's sort of the part that kind of almost everybody knows now with Twitch and YouTube, and even, you know, church or public speaking or orals in elementary school. It's just part of that. Like, no, this is your audience in front of you, and you have to address them. You're kind of not getting away with too much on those points. But once you learn what an audience is and how they each sort of individually interpret you and what you're saying, you get to be a better writer for that, and you get to you learn your own tricks for that type of trade. So this is where I'm going to plug the Wheel of Asset Creation. It's fantastic for this to be. Excuse me. It's fantastic for this to be able to keep track of your project. We'll use a new one. Bring that up. Oops. Okay. So why I'm going to plug this right now is because it's going to have it also helping. It's also there and able to help you. Yeah, it's also there and able to help you. That's more appropriate. Okay, so it's also able to help you to be able to help you through different plot points and stuff like that. It's able to just guide when you get a writer's block, when you're not able to reconcile various plot points or movements, or it's like you could throw a character into this and be able to have them sort of do their own thing. You get to use your little your imagination a little bit there, but where I would kind of draw attention to would be sort of like, well, what is your character doing in their plans for action? And then it's like, well, are they going to go to Bill's house? Yes. Okay, well, do they have to worry about money to go to the Bill's house, or are they just going to go there? Are they going to take the bus? What's going to happen on the bus? Like you can start like throwing different things into this tool, and it's great like that. It's its own sort of jolly good time, we'll say, where you as a creator can use this to sort of drive your book along. But that's sort of one of those things that are just going to they're gonna work for you, So on your plate, let's make a book plate. We got the meat. We got through all of our big plot points and our character resolutions, and so who's in the book. You know what they're doing. You know what the big, like, why they're doing it kind of push. And you know where it is. So you did your, like, who, what, where, why, and how. If it's a more technical book, you've sort of laid out so in your introduction, we have to talk about this. In materials and methods, we have to talk about that. In your results question section, we have to hit these bullet points. So now your next sort of stage is to just sort of fill it in with, it's not filler content, and it's like fluff or cheapness. It's more sort of the vegetables on your plate, and you gotta eat them. It's more that where you go with the vegetables on your plate. Sometimes this is where it's like sometimes your readers might not like their vegetables. So it's like, what types of details or what types of little side stories are you going to put in your character of developments? This is kind of where your character development comes in. And you get to reveal little, backstories about each of the characters. And you get to incorporate, other researchers' work in the field that you're writing for. If it's a script, it could be something. This also applies to scripts because 3 hours of film can be 300 pages sometimes. But this is the part where you start to fill out what the characters are kind of saying. You have that vision in your head, but you want to get that vision onto paper and then back onto the screen, which is like worse because you'd rather just film it yourself directly. But to tell the story with the emotional depth that you want it told in, you do have to go through this refinement process. And at your vegetables here, we get into stuff. These would be like the emotional or character conflicts between characters. This would be, this research group says this stuff, but then this other research group is saying other stuff, and we're still trying to find, we're taking the reader on our journey to consensus. Then the next sort of thing and with regards to illustration, this is when you start kind of making your more refined. This is when you start adding color in the meat. If you're doing illustrations, you want to have your pictures planned, or if you're doing graphs or something like that, this is where you plan for what imagery you want to provide with the written text. How much are you going to teach? How much are you going to teach your audience here? And that's sort of like the big. Remember that kid in Jurassic Park? Or when Dr. Grant's in Jurassic Park, just pretending to be electrocuted on the fence there. That's sort of the emotion where he's just like, he's friggin' with the kids, but at the same time he's scared shitless himself because if it turns on, if those fences turn on, it's 50,000 volts. Set aside time in your actual life to do it. Pandemics kind of got rolling lockdown going around now. We got to, people have vaccines kind of happening, but it might be a good time to start. I can get a week here or a week there, or I can't, or I'm not going to speak more about it. But if you want to write a book, you do have to set the time aside, whether it's 2 hours every night after the kids are asleep. But at least you build that. It's going to take about 6 weeks of 2 hours at night to get to the point where you have, okay, I got a draftable manuscript now, and I can take this and put it, I can give it to somebody else, right? So if you really want to get to the point where you're comfortable showing it to somebody else, and you want to show it to somebody else sooner rather than later, because they're gonna come in, and if you show it to the right person, they're gonna actually understand what you're talking about here, or where you want to go with it. They're gonna offer you. Everybody offers the same type of stuff through their own friendship, or it's like, oh, if this was my book, I'd write it this way. They always put if this was my book, I would do this. Let that pass, and then say, okay, this is your book, but you're editing it. When you do that, give them the vision too. This is the vision of the book I want. Can you edit it? Can you help me see if I'm, you need that echo chamber, and you need somebody to be able to actually like echo chamber constructively. So if you know anybody, like if anybody's a teacher, or if anybody did an English degree or something like that, or even did those creative writing classes, they have to know how to edit. So like if you're doing reports and stuff like that, find someone who does report writing at work or that kind of stuff. That's the important skill set, because they'll be able to understand editing and revising documents. They're going to edit and revise documents how they do it, but at least you as the author or creator of the book or property got it out of your system. It's the fear of showing people. It's like a stage fright kind of. So it's like, just okay, there's enough here that it tells a story. You should be doing that after you finish the meat on the plate kind of thing. So, as soon as you get that done, you're happier, because it's out of your it's out of your control, and it won't become an obsession. And that's what I kind of found writing a couple of my stuff, where it's just like, the first time I did this, I had written other stuff before under the crunch of a course-based deadline, but this is the first time I had written something in a much larger frame of time. I was afforded more time to write this book than I had ever had for a single assignment kind of thing. So you almost get lost with too much time. So it's very much like, if you get a chapter out, send that off to somebody. Don't write the whole thing, because you might end up a part where it's like, oh, if I had sent that out first, the feedback would have solved the problem, instead of continuing to write like 5 chapters, instead of doing that at like chapter 5. So it's like you can kind of back up your train a little bit here where you don't want to back it up. You really need to have it going forward all the time, because it's not a mistake, but if something is realized or brought to light in chapter 1 and 2, that then affects the progression of the plot points up to chapter, maybe 5 or 6. That's extremely defeatist. That's extremely like, oh my God, like world crushing, like holy fuck, my life is over with. Let's burn the book instead. It's that type of feeling. And that anxiety can be dealt with and managed really early on, when you finish your characters and your major plot points, and you just sort of get rid of, you get to know first if anybody's going to like your book or not. If you're doing it for publication type of stuff. If you're doing it for your own personal self, nobody cares. That's sort of the I call it cajoling, but that's sort of, those are just the two. They're apples and oranges. They're just two separate, and they're apart from each other. That's just sort of how it should go, I guess. So once you get used to the fact of finding someone who's going to be able to, they don't have to. It would be great if you could find like another person who's written stuff to do this type of revising for you. But if it's your first time sort of doing anything, you really kind of have to want to open up, and that's the best part, because it's a really bad book pun, but it's a book pun nonetheless. So it's like, it's meant to be read. It's meant to be read for other people. Even if it's just for you or your child, you still want to put that extra TLC or that scrapbooking type of patience into creating or developing it. So it's like, going back to the Mary Had a Little Lamb example, you write it out and you put like Mary Had a Little Lamb on one page and then the other, and you do your rough sketches. Okay, that's easy, that's great. That might actually just be too simple. That's the ultimate simple example, where it's like, if you're doing that for your child, or a younger family member, it can still be a nerve-wracking experience when you're trying to get what you want in terms of color or pictures, or how you want, how do you want to express that? Because the book is an expression of, you could have Mary Had a Little Lamb with little stick figures without color and that sort of it. But if you want to bring that up to like the professional level, you're starting to get into preliminary sketches. There's sketch, not sketchboard. I want to call it sketchboarding, but it's that thing when you see like people doing full-on movies where they have like, in this scene there's half a sketch, in that scene there's a sketch, in the other scene there's a sketch. That type of, that's the imagery I'm trying to work on there. But a really nice watercolor Mary Had a Little Lamb book would be absolutely fantastic. And you can paint and develop. If you have a painting skill, this is one of those things that, the sky's the limit. It's just sort of, now send Mary through the jungle looking for the lamb. that takes the book and just sort of like makes it more complicated, adds in some of the extra features, but it's still a basic premise that you're going to be able to use for your own self and in your own work. Illustrations are a little bit different because they're more, well, they're illustrations. They're illustrations and pictures, but they say 1,000 words, and they really help to pull somebody into the experience that your book is trying to resonate with. And that's sort of the part where people like books, because people like pictures in books, because they read through the experience of the picture. Even if it's something like a stick figure sketch in the book, to just, it always just sort of provides a mental image of what's going on in that world, and that ends up coming back into your world when you got to get up and go to work the next day, kind of thing. That picture in the book is still sort of like flagged or earmarked. Oh yeah, I remember seeing that the other day, or here's this other thing there. And well, I guess what I wanted to say there is I can't I can edit, but I'm not gonna draw. Well, no, it's like you know how to judge your own drawing abilities and what's level or scale or depth or style of illustrations you want to have in your book. And I would just very much encourage them, even if they're photographs. Taking a really good picture has really sort of been made accessible to almost everyone. If you have a cell phone, you can take pictures. If you don't have a cell phone, chances are someone who has a cell phone that could take that type of picture. Anyway, But yeah, pictures are really good. So now we have sort of the side dish. We went through the meat and we went through the veg, and now we're kind of addressing the side portion of like what's on your plate in building a book. On the side portion, it's sort of, this is like where your potato, if you got a steak and a potato and some vegetables, this is the potato we're talking about. The potato part is, I use fries because I like fries, but but the same thing is there. This is the glue that holds the rest of the book together, and it comes last because you have to get those big major plot points really solidified. And if you're doing some of the, if you're having some of the potato while you're eating the steak and the vegetables, that's fine. Okay, well, I don't want to dictate on like an order of operations type of thing, but it's usually you've gotten 1 or 2 rounds of editing in by the time you start getting into this really finite nitpicky type of, if this character says this way, is it still going to have the impact or expression? And you might have 3, if you have 5 total reviews or I want to say edits, it might not necessarily, readings, I'll call them readings. If you give your book away 5 different, so the first one was after you had ideas, the second one meat, and then after your veg, you're gonna have about 3 readings book in your in this potato part of the book, be able to really make sure that the emotions that you want to transmit and you want to capture them really want to say. And this is the worst part of it, because it's where the professionalism and the experience really add up, because somebody who's experienced is going to be able to know what those changes are. Kind of as you say that, because they do this with other people's book. They just do them repeatedly. In terms of that Mary Had a Little Lamb one, you can tell the difference between a younger illustrator. I'm gonna say a less experienced illustrator and more experienced illustrator within the same art style. It just might be the use of colors, but it's that type of thing. We're sort of that's sort of the. So from my own experiences, the meat for the book was basically, can this exist? And then you kind of do a search, and you do most. And I did most of my research in the meat phase of the book, and you learn the subject material during this phase. If it's a research book, if it's an interview type of book, if you're doing a ghostwriter book, this is where you're learning the other person, or learning what they want you to say, or learning how to say it. It's like you're learning the subject material. From that point, you go and you have your own mental maps. But this is where you're kind of getting, you're getting like, aha moments kind of thing. It's like, oh no, she's there and she's doing this stuff. Meanwhile, I'm here doing this stuff. And you start making those connections into your own life. It's very enriching just to be able to try to go through that planning phase. So for me, this is writing out your introduction section. So for me, I had 6 chapters, and in this phase 1 is getting, just in a Word document or on a bunch of scrap paper, getting the individual sections formatted excuse me, getting the individual sections formatted and being able to just see the skeletal structure, the backbone of what this is actually going to look like as a full-on document. So you might have a table of contents, you might have a references section. It's really a get that up and going. For me, there were the 3 chapters of the introduction, chapter 4, 5, and then 4, 5, and 6. So the introduction section is, okay, put everything down that you know, that's shocking. Put everything you know down. It doesn't matter if it's right or it's wrong. Just put everything that you know, like fly by the seat of your pants and just get it in there. Because that's the part where it's like, okay, you can take all that and have someone look at it and, you know, poor younger me thought what he did was like super, oh, look at this line. And I use big fancy words here and there and so proud. First thing it was just like, if it remained, it was like the title of the chapter. The only thing that was left was the title of the chapter, because everything else was either deleted or written over. A lot of that was the voice that we're using to younger people writing books is different than older people writing books. The voice changes. There's a different type of maturity in it. So I kind of fought with my first round of edits that way, but it was good because it got that, it, you know, kind of loosens you up to, you know, accept the it's not a criticism. It's not an I hate you, but it is, this can be made better in this manner and fashion of which you have not yet thought. But nobody ever says it like that, because you know, you can understand. It's like, yes, I understand other people don't think this way. Or I haven't thought this way yet either. But what happens is it's like, yeah, I failed. That's where you kind of end up with, it's like, oh, no. But it is actually, yeah, you failed. And that's the first sort of like, that's the anxiety of failure, of just get rid of it. When you can walk yourself through the plot line, get rid of it, have somebody do it, whatever, because then you're going to be able to have their input as a first audience member. You know, we can talk about here, we can talk about these 2 interactions. How does this relationship grow and expand throughout the book? Because, you know, it's sort of like, it's doing one of those Bob Ross paintings where you painted your canvas and you put the mountain on the back, and then you let somebody see it. And they say, okay, well, that's great. Is there going to be a house in it? Or like, what story do you want? A painting is a lot harder than a book, because you only get 1 page to tell the story. And you get that luxury in a book. You have, you know, 100 pages, 200 pages or something like that. It could be 3, could be 4. There's, you know, who knows? It could be 5. Could be 5. It could be 5 pages. Mary Had a Little Lamb is a 5-page book. Number one bestseller. That's where you want to be with it. Where you're at in your own individual sort of journey depends on your own. We're gonna go with, but anyway, right after I had received those first sets of edits, you kind of know it's not going to be easy, and that's sort of your checkpoint where it's like, are you going to be able to, are you gonna finish this? Are you doing the long haul? Are you gonna make your book? You got your first taste of your own medicine kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, you know what, I still have to, if the book is going to be a book, you still have to finish the book. You know, if you're going to finish, you know, at that point when you get it back, that you're going to have to finish this book, or you're going to have to finish a movie script, or you're going to have to finish telling what you want to tell the way you want to tell it. Though that's the veg period. That's the difficulty of it, because now you got the bulk out of the way, but now you have to add your facts into it. And if you're doing in my world, it was a little bit so what had happened was I put out the memorized knowledge, or the sort of like general common knowledge type of stuff, but then in the vegetable portion you have to go in and support or supplement that information with or that knowledge, with information. And that means you have to go into like other sources and journals and have them back up your claims. In a novel, this is more like, okay, does this relationship growth still remain tied to the characters that you started with and the backstories that you kind of started with? So you end up fact checking against your own fantasy world. Did you break your own canon, kind of thing, and end up in if it was a fantasy land and then you ended up in New York, how did you end up in New York? Or if you started in New York and ended up in Imagination Land, and you're not, and you never intended that. That's sort of like one of those things where it's just like, well, if the setting that you started with starts to drift or move, you're gonna have to sort of invent or seal up the backdrop setting that your picture is happening with. So back to the Bob Ross example, you painted the sky and the land, and now you're putting in the mountains. The mountains are in place, but now it's like, well, are there trees? How close is it? What's the perspective of it? Are we going to have a lake? Is there going to be some creeks and rivers happening there? That's most of the veg, and that's why most people hate it, because you're pushing through the thick of things there, and you still have to go to the lighthearted, sort of like mini details of writing the book, and that's mostly just content-wise. We're not even getting to the grammar, and never mind the grammar or the structure or some of the descriptive words of having that other person in the audience sort of like look at your stuff. That's fine, but you've already gotten used to that by getting rid of by passing off your material way back at sort of the meat stage of this book writing ordeal, we'll call it. So you have your skeleton in your book done. Then you put the meat you put the organs in. You don't put the meat on the bones, you put the organs in. And everybody always forgets about the organs, but the veg portion is the organ portion of this. So you got your outline, you got your, from your notebooks of ideas to your word processor, getting the structure of the book in place. So like those are your chapter headings kind of thing, your chapters and your what do I want to call them? Like table of contents, that type of stuff. Reference notes, that's those types of things. Image lists if you have them. So there's that. So your third round, you're going to edit for content and continuities. Your fourth round is for formatting, and formatting is such a bitch if you have pictures and stuff like that, because one picture in a Word document is just gonna like sort of boom, it just threw off all your page counts. So that type of stuff really gets annoying. But it's all the polish, and you have to do it. There's a couple of, the last thing you do is a table of contents with page numbers, because you just keep it just changes so fast and rapidly. It's like literally the last thing you ever do. You might put in your different section headings, but the last thing you ever do is count the page numbers. And references. Everybody hates references. What else is there? 300. Oh yeah, pictures. If you're going to do a picture for most sort of like, at least in the academic world, if you're doing pictures for publishing, it's 300 DPI minimum. And if your pictures don't apply to that, or your figure images and file sizes, your publisher's going to hate you. Like, to the point where you would have to like recreate that picture. And that's just like, so you really have to watch your image qualities if you're going to a publisher. I had the book bound. They didn't require anything other than a PDF of the file or some electronic file. They did all the work there, which was absolutely fantastic. But doing the online applications with an online publisher, what they want is what they want, because what they do is what they do, and it's more of that's the part where you start getting exhausted, because not only did you do most of the work when you don't want to finish the meal on your plate, but you still have to finish the meal on your plate. You did all the work, you did all the writing, you did all the formatting, and now the publisher wants you to do their formatting, and you're just sort of like, okay, just do it, but you're also like, you're exhausted with the process. This is where the exhaustion kicks in, because it's now somebody else's requirements. They're not your requirements. And that's a part of creating and being a creator that really just sort of like makes me just want to quit the job, because it's like, you're still not acknowledged. It's like, okay, we acknowledged that you did this amount of stuff, but if you want us to do anything, we need it in these formats, but they don't tell you that. And that's part of the relationship that you want to have built with yourself and your publisher, because they're going to say, it's like, yeah, okay, we need it in these formats so that we can actually, publish it. If it has to go to a printer or a physical magazine, different output formats have different technical requirements, because there are inks and there are dyes and there are papers. The paper that you wrote it on is not that high gloss sheen stuff. Like, everything can be arranged and made up, but at the same time, if you want anybody to read it, you have to help the people who are helping you make it help you to make it too. It's usually when you're actually ready to change hands of your work and having somebody else work for you, that you can't let go at that point. You still have to be in charge, but you now have to learn what type of book you want. Do you want color photos? Do you want it on different types of paper? So you're not really thinking about, you just want it to, you started off wanting to tell your you wanted to start off telling your story, but at the same time, you're now at this point where it's just like, I just did all that work telling the story. Now I have to go through a double amount of work. So you got to do it twice almost. The first time is just you getting it on paper and that struggle and having it be made real. And then the other half is in having other people enjoy it the way you want them to enjoy it. And that part becomes the other half of the learning curves that a lot of people, that's the part where people are like, whoa, I thought this was magic and you were all professionals. I was like, no, no, no. You will literally own your story and you will literally own your book. It's your job to sell it, kind of thing. They'll help you sell it and recover costs and stuff like that. But the publishers are just basically, or rather there's the printer and the publisher. I'm kind of fusing them together, but this is actually more to the printer. But How You Want Mary's Had a Little Lamb to Be Experienced and Enjoyed is really sort of are you going to put it on cardstock to have extra texture with the watercolor painted illustrations you have on there? Like, it can be a very thought-felt and sentimental experience sharing that book with someone else. A lot of the times, like, you're not making tomes like those old like those old English, you're not making a Harry Potter tome, but at the same time, you can make a Harry Potter tome. You can hire a calligrapher and hand scribe your story. There are really a lot of options, and a good printer and a good publisher will help you be able to tell that story in really nice and subtle and intimate ways. Will allow you to feel satisfied of what you started out to do. And that's sort of the whole point of the book writing power hour here, because it's really making sure that you have the final version and the final product of what you want. If you wanted a book of magic, does it look like a book of magic? Does it sound like a book of magic? If you wanted to tell a romance novel, did you put pictures in it? Or did you sail the high seas? You know what I mean? If it's one of those Harlequin romance novels kind of things, it's like, did you tell your story the way you wanted to tell it, or did it end up chunky and awkward and misguided and just sort of, well, it was on paper. You know what I mean? Like, did you half-ass it? Or did you actually, like, give it your all, kind of thing? Because it's better to try. If it's your first time writing a technical report or something for school or for work, it all of this still kind of applies, because you would still have to have, you'd have to write out which segments of who you're speaking to are trying to educate about what you're trying to educate. So you need an introduction section, and you need to do your research, and you need to have references, and then you're going to have some pictures, and then you're going to have you're going to have all of that in there. And then you have to have your references, and you have to annotate your references. But you also get help with that too. And that's pretty much book writing. Why'd you do it, and who you're selling it to? Those are usually the two reasons to write a book. You want to do it, or you have to tell someone something. You have to tell someone something. How are you going to tell them? And you tell them through a book. So that's about time for this week. I'm gonna switch over and pimp the wheel of asset creation one last time. It's $1 on the innovativepotential.com. It's great. It's a great tool for just doing stuff with. In terms of the book, if one of your characters or your plot gets stuck, try using these just these keyword phrases. And the other, we also have another video explaining all of this asset creation in terms of business, but it can be used in terms of book, story, or report. It's just there to try and give you some ideas of what you're talking about and where you're going in relation to, pretty much everybody else in the world. I use it for my stuff. It's conceptual in nature, and it actually works when you sit down and apply your own stuff to it. If you have any questions in the chat, feel free to ask away. I'm gonna stick around, but that's it for the Power Hour this week. Check out some of the other stuff, the other videos on the Twitch stream, and we'll see you next week. A bientôt. Ciao.